Il Siracusano is the latest event in Arknights, and it's pretty solid overall. I do have to say I have a few issues with the story, but for the most part, it does play out fairly neatly. It tells the story of Texas's return to Siracusa after being forced to go back by Zaro. And there's quite a large cast in this event, like there is in many of Arknights' events, so I'm just going to give us a quick rundown on who's who. So, on the characters we are mainly following, we have Texas, obviously, Lapland, Vigil, Penance, and the girls from Penguin Logistics, Sora, Croissant, and Exia. The antagonists of the story are Zaro, the Rosati family, the Bologna family, and the Saluzzo family. And specifically from those families, Wallach, Bernardo, and Alberto will be the main faces of them. And of course, before we get into any of the story, I want to give a special shout out to the GOAT of Arknights, Emperor. My man goes crazy no matter what he's doing. He just looks so out of place everywhere, and it's fantastic. And he is easily one of the most enjoyable characters to watch. So let's hop into the story, and I'll explain it poorly, but we shall get the general idea of it. Of course, if you want to get the most out of this, you should definitely read the event. So Zaro shows up in Lungmen to bring Texas back to Siracusa in order to help the Bologna family achieve dominance. However, Emperor shows up before this happens to apply the goddamn roast on this man to remind him that his place is beneath Emperor, because once again, Emperor is the GOAT. But regardless of Emperor's interference, Zaro is taking Texas back to Siracusa so the event can happen. And Lapland, who if you don't know anything about her, is obsessed with Texas, is going to be present in order to cause some trouble. The girls from Penguin's Logistics don't accept that Texas has abandoned them, and so travel to Siracusa in order to help her. During this time, Sora decides that she will have an acting career and meets Bernardo, who is the leader of the Bologna family, unbeknownst to her, who gives her the lead role in a play about the Texas family. The Texas family was a mafia group from Siracusa originally, but they moved to Colombia. And while in Colombia, they became so powerful that even the families of Siracusa looked up to them. But due to the power-hungry nature of Texas's father, she is now the last member of that family, but her name still demands respect. And as such, when one of the most powerful civilians in Siracusa is assassinated, it is Texas herself that ends up taking the blame for this, and nobody really bats an eye because Texas is extremely respected. However, Lapland has other ideas and drives a truck into Penance's courtroom in order to confess to this assassination. Now, neither of these two are responsible for the assassination attempt, but Bernardo isn't exactly forthcoming with his motivation at this point in the story. After Lapland is arrested, Penance wants to get to the bottom of this case, and it leads her directly into Bernardo, who's formed an alliance with Alberto, who is Lapland's father. Just throwing that out there, it's kind of important. And they have decided they're going to team up to crush the current leader of Siracusa, Cecilia. This is very distressing to Penance because Bernardo was very hands-off when it came to dealing with her in terms of enforcing the mob's justice, and Penance was even able to rule against Bernardo's people due to her own sense of justice, and as such, she believed Bernardo aligned more with her beliefs and wasn't a power-hungry mafioso. She obviously doesn't know Bernardo's true motivations, which go far beyond even her hatred of the family system, and he wants it completely abolished. But we don't discover that until it is too late for Bernardo. And due to the alliance formed by the Bolognes and Saluzzo families, Texas is forced to agree to assassinate one of her old friends, Giovanna. In order to do this, she infiltrates the show that Sora is performing in, and due to it, a battle breaks out within the theater, which is what the Il Siracusano trailer is based on. It pretty much happens beat for beat in the story. It is pretty cool that the trailer directly happens in this story. But of course, this ends with Texas getting to Giovanna. However, Texas does not kill her, and Giovanna gets away. And after making her escape, Texas is cornered by a few mafiosos, but she is bailed out by Penguin Logistics, which, you know, it's nice to see the girls reuniting, even under some poor circumstances. And in this moment, something really interesting to me happens, which is that Exia gets to speak with another Sancta. This guy's name is Agnir, and he is one of Sicilia's right-hand men. And despite him being clearly a dangerous man, Exia simply asks him to let her go, and he agrees to it, which is kind of interesting and cool because it gives a little bit more sancta lower. But Giovanna is not out of the woods yet. Despite Texas's assassination having failed, her own family assassinate her in order to increase their own power. However, she does survive this, and it is one of my issues with the story, which is that this would have been a lot more powerful of a scene if she had been killed. But for whatever reason, they didn't go through with it. Maybe they're planning on using her in a future story. Maybe they're not. If they're not, I think she definitely should have been killed here. But what happens, happens. I disagree with it, but it does happen. After the assassination of Giovanna, Rubio, who is being put into a position as basically a political pawn for the Bologna and Saluzzo families, decides he's going to buck the trend and basically tells the families that they are irrelevant and that their power is waning in Siracusa. This, of course, gets him assassinated by Dan Brown, and it gets Penance to reaffirm her convictions of toppling the family system and gets her to act in order to bring together the citizenry of Siracusa in order to help her put the families in their place. Rubio's actions does get Dan Brown to say that Alberto is going too far. However, Alberto is quite capable of killing himself and slits his throat. And unlike Giovanna, Dan Brown dies. And after this, Penance and the group of people she has gotten around her seize control of the new mobile city so that the citizenry have the most power. This is all part of Bonado's plan, who was basically acting to bring down the family system from the inside. However, he knows by doing this that his life is forfeit, as he is one of Zaro's fangs. The fangs are a kind of unique system purely used by Zaro and his kind to battle against each other in the human world. It basically is just them not wanting to fight each other, and so they'll use humans in order to do it. Luckily for Bonado, he gets one last talk with his son Vigil before Zaro comes to confront him. However, Bonado knows his life is already over, so he takes a poison pill in order to prevent Zaro from getting the last laugh of killing him. However, Zaro flies into a rage and decides that he will kill Vigil as punishment for this. And during this time, Lapland goes to meet with her father one last time, which gets her fully kicked out of the family, and Alberto is now ready to kill her if they ever meet again. Vigil is confronted by Zaro, and despite any help he has, he's pretty much doomed because Zaro is immortal, essentially. However, the GOAT, the pinnacle of the verse, Emperor, shows up to put Zaro in his place. And he shows up with one of the hardest CGs in existence. And this event has some great CGs, but this one is so good, it's amazing. It is fantastic. A penguin holding a gun surrounded by wolves. Glorious. Absolutely glorious. And it doesn't really matter, but he also gets to call Cecilia sexy. My man has that Emperor Riz. And before the event is over, we have just a few more things to talk about, which is that Lapland and Texas get into a fight. And this time, Texas loses against Lapland, but due to the circumstances of the event, it doesn't result in Texas dying. This is basically them having settled their old debts, and they are ready to move forward into the next phase of their lives, which involves Vigil carrying on his father's will in order to topple the family system. This will be done with the help of Lapland, Texas, and Penance, but it will happen at some stage, and I'm sure that's going to be what the next Siracusa event, if it happens, is going to be about. And now, at the very end, we get to talk about one of the things I also dislike about this event, which was the fact that they just added in Project Red and Crown Slayer lore for no goddamn reason. Like, we could have had another short story event where this content was covered, but we didn't, because for whatever reason, they wanted to cover it in Il Siracusano. I mean, the stuff is interesting. Project Red being a fang is cool. It didn't need to happen in this event. It kind of feels tacked on at the end, which, you know, you don't necessarily want to have at the end of the story, because it kind of interrupts the kind of flow of the event for me. Like, right after the scene, we have Vigil burying his father. which is way more thematically relevant than the fact that Crown Slayer is in Siracusa in the first place. I want Crown Slayer to show back up again, but this feels like it's just tacked on at the end to justify a future Project Red altar or a future Crown Slayer operator coming into the game. And that is the event known as Il Siracusano. Again, I really enjoyed this event, but I have pointed out a few of the flaws in it. I think overall it does a fairly poor job of justifying Texas Altar's existence. It kind of was just like she came home, so we gave her some new gear. It didn't seem like it was a continuation of her character, which again, I made an Altar video, and I think that's one of the issues is that they don't justify it a lot, and Texas definitely falls into that category. Now that I've played the event, I can firmly say that I think she needed more justification. Other than that, the event does open a lot of interesting possibilities. Siracusa is a really interesting area, and I would like to go back there again in the future. Penance is a really interesting character, and I want her to get more attention in the future because she is that good. Vigil, being the free operator this event, is actually really good. Normally the welfare units I feel are underutilized, but Vigil is utilized extremely well. So overall I would say it's definitely an event worth reading, but I would like to see what they do with it in the future. And with all that being said, I'm gonna head out. See y'all later. Have a good one. Be good people.